Hey, Sean here from the Commander's Brew. I'm gonna go through the brewing process for Baba LYSAGA Night Witch. What's that joke about a sand witch? What kind of witch is inside bread? Sandwich, night witch. So there's something there. Anyway, I'm gonna take you through the process of how this deck came to be. Check it out. Okay, Baba LYSAGA. I think this is the perfect type of commander to illustrate how a deck can be put together just from letting different cards inform your decisions for different cards. Baba LYSAGA doesn't have a win con on her. She's just some value. And as a result, that kind of leaves us a bit open for the brewing process. Which way do we go? Do we start with the end? Do we start with the beginning? And so here's my process. Here's how I come up with a deck for a commander like this. Maybe it's the same way you do, or maybe it's a different way, but I think it's a fun exercise. Let me know what you think in the comments. So let's look at our commander. She's a cheap commander at 3 mana value. That's pretty good. And the key here is we're going to sacrifice up to 3 permanents, and we want to get 3 or more card types among them. We're going to draw a bunch of cards. Our opponents are going to lose some life, and we're going to gain some life. Is this our win con? Not necessarily, but we're definitely going to focus on the value. We got to hit those permanent types. And I think the key thing that's worth noting is that we can sacrifice up to 3 permanents, and we got to hit those 3 types. So if we can hit things that are multiple types, then we have to sacrifice fewer things. And my first thought is artifact creatures. There's a ton of little artifact creatures that count for 2 types that do a little bit of extra when they come in. Sky Scanner and Pilgrim's Eye specifically are both 2 cards that sort of draw cards. Sky Scanner literally does, and Pilgrim's Eye draws us specifically a land. And then cards like Copper and Leaden Mirror are definitely ones we want to include. They're good ramp for early in the game, and then when it comes time to get our engine going, we can sack them as 2 types if need be. And they can be tokens too, so something like Servo Schematic comes down for 2 mana and creates a servo with it, and later on, if we decide to sacrifice the Servo Schematic, we get another servo to sack later on. Same deal for Mirror Sire. 2 sacks, 1 card. And I think Sorcerer's Brew might have room in the deck. This is not a fantastic card by any means, but if there's ever a deck that wants to run it, it's this one. So Artifact Creature is going to be a pretty easy thing to hit. There's tons of them. And we can always sacrifice a land as our 3rd permanent if we want. I don't want to do that. So another easy type to find is an enchantment. I love sagas like Binding the Old Gods or Song of Freyalise because they both do useful things that we want in the deck. Either it's removal or some more ramp. And these sagas will sacrifice themselves at the 3rd step. But if you put the 3rd ability on the stack and then use Baba LYSAGA's ability to sacrifice this plus an artifact creature. I mean, this was going to the graveyard anyway. You get your 3 cards, your 3 life, your opponents lose 3 life, and we really are only down 1 card since these enchantments were going to go away anyway. And let's take a second and look at some Planeswalkers. Ob Nixilis the Hate Twisted is a great example from War of the Spark of some Planeswalkers that tick down. They do a little bit, and then they're kind of useless. I mean, not entirely. That's a decent static ability. Once we're bored of it, we can sacrifice Ob Nixilis as a permanent. Sorry, Ob. Business is business. And although Karn's Scion of Urza never actually becomes useless, we can always use these abilities. The constructs he makes will probably get big with all of our artifact creatures. Or maybe not if we keep sacrificing them. I'm not sure. Either way, it's something we can sacrifice. The body he makes and the Planeswalker himself. In an emergency, this is a 1-card sack 3 permanents, the artifact creature token plus the Planeswalker. But there's another way to slice this. A lot of lands also have another type on them. Dryad Arbor is the easy example because it's the creature land. You don't have to pay mana or anything to activate this, although we could also include a bunch of those ones where we do pay mana for it. I like to not pay mana for things. I'm a VIP. And then something like Dark Moss Bridge or the Power Depot. These are artifact lands that, well, they count as 2 types, lands and artifacts. There is a bit of overlap there because if we're looking to sacrifice mostly artifact creatures and these are artifact lands, it's still only 2 cards, but it's the same type twice, so we don't really need to do that. So I don't love the idea of sacrificing lands, but we have the option. Why not put them in the deck? But if we are thinking about sacking lands sometimes, I think it's worth running a card like Mending of Dominaria. It's another enchantment that's going to disappear after the 3rd chapter, so we can use it as an include, and then we can get back all those lands we sacrificed earlier. While its 3rd trigger is on the stack, we will sacrifice this plus an artifact land. There's our 3 types, and that land we just sacrificed comes back to the battlefield right away. And notably, it doesn't say they come back tapped. I don't think I realized that before. Special shout out to Eudora Grave Gardener. we're going to have a lot of non-token creatures die, and there are quite a few enchantments or effects that whenever you sacrifice a non-token creature, you get a zombie or a sapperling or something like that. But turning these into forests is a sort of ramp, and it's a card type that we might need to sacrifice sometimes. So this is a way to get a lot of extra lands out there that we're happy to sacrifice. Big fan of this card. Okay, we've done some pretty good exploring about different types. We've got a lot of possible types, dense types. So I think we'll be able to get Baba Lysaga's ability going pretty smoothly. Every deck needs a removal, and I think there's an interesting twist here. I mean, we probably already want to run the Liquimetal cards, the Torque and the Coating. These are a couple cards that can turn any permanent on the battlefield into an artifact in addition to their other types. So you know what that means. All of our artifact destruction is actually anything destruction. Reclamation Sage is just a classic. It comes in, does its job of destroying an artifact or any permanent if we have a Liquimetal thing, and then it's great sack fodder later on. It's done its job. You can die now. And I think Manglehorn's stock is going up for the mere fact that our opponent's artifacts enter tapped. Treasures are everywhere now. This is a big slowdown. And the Sagas from Neon Dynasty are especially good with those Liquimetal cards because once they turn into enchantment creatures, we tap those artifacts to turn this into an artifact, and this is a single 3-type permanent: artifact, enchantment, and creature. Pretty good. And another way to make enchantment creature tokens is Farika, God of Affliction. I had a hard time with this card. It really bothers me that it isn't always you that gets the snakes. But we don't have a ton of reanimating in our deck, so exiling a creature card from our graveyard to get an enchantment creature token out of the battlefield, a Liquimetal card turns it to an artifact, and there's another 1 permanent sack for all 3 types. Oh hey, Darksteel Eric here. Just gonna jump in real quick and remind you to like and subscribe the video. And as a representative of Darksteel Industries, controlling interest in the podcast, here's 2 ads, one fake, one real. Do you ever have fancy dinners? If so, you're going to want to have them on dark steel plates, dark steel forks, dark steel spoons, dark steel cutlery, dark steel trivets, all the dark steel accessories. How about a dark steel gravy bowl? Make your next family holiday great with dark steel silverware and plateware. For $199 a month. Order now, supplies are limited. And now the real ad, wizardtower.com. You're going to want to head over there for all of your Magic content, articles, deck text, that sort of thing. And if you're listening from Canada, we've got the best deal for you. Use our coupon code BREWDOUBLE to get 5% off your order of singles, $20 or more. That's the best deal in town. And now, back to the show. So we're talking about sacrificing a few creatures, but not that many, to keep the engine running. We're probably drawing a bunch of cards a turn once we get rolling. And I think our board could get pretty wide, so we have to look at +1/+1 counters. Sacrificing and +1/+1 counters merge perfectly in Mazarek Crowl Death Priest. And as I said, treasures are getting much more prominent, so I think Mazarek will trigger way more than he did when it was first printed. And here's my dream neat move. You get Mazarek down, sack some things, put a +1/+1 counter on everything, then resolve a Kodama of the West tree. Now everything's modified, so when we hit, we're going to put a bunch of lands into play right away. That's how I like to ramp. And then it won't feel so bad to sacrifice a land now and again. And the best cross between the Liquimetal cards and +1/+1 counters is Steelbane Hydra. We'll have no shortage of +1/+1 counters to keep destroying artifacts or any permanent we want on the battlefield. And at that point, let's put it into Tawashi Guidebot. Adds a counter, which is nice, and should effectively be just tap, draw a card. It's an artifact creature, so if we've got our engine going and we really don't need the extra 1 card, sack it. Whenever a deck is drawing a lot of cards like this, you want to consider ways to get more cards out of your hand. This includes cheap spells on average, but also ways to play more than 1 land each turn. We're playing more lands, we're talking sacrifice. We got to talk Gitrog Monster. So let's go through it. You draw 1 card per turn. Gitrog Monster makes you sack 1 land, which draws you a 2nd card. Then Baba Lysaga sacrifices 1 more land and 1 artifact creature. Gitrog has us draw 1 for that land sack. Baba Lysaga has us draw 3 for that land sack. That's 6 cards drawn in the turn. We've sacrificed 2 lands, and we get to play 2 lands. Out of those 6 cards, I would be shocked if we didn't have 2 lands to put back into play. So that means we're churning through our deck and we're keeping land neutral. If you got enough lands, being land neutral is fine. And I've already made the comment a few times this episode, treasures are everywhere, and we're going to add treasures as well. If we're planning on being land neutral for a lot of the game, let's make some treasures. Let's get mana positive. And then if we're doing a lot of treasures, We're already thinking about sacrificing artifact creatures. What about Marionette Master? One of my favorite finishers in the game. If we need artifact creatures, we can make 3 servos, but if we don't, we can make it big, get a bunch of +1/+1 counters thrown on as well, and now we just have to sacrifice a handful of treasures and basically eliminate a player. And I guess it depends how you remove the card, but just in case you were wondering, if you remove Marionette Master with a destroy effect and the abilities are on the stack, those abilities will resolve and the game will remember Marionette Master's last known power, so you'll still get credit for it. Unless the effect is something like -13, some kind of tragic slip thing. But if we want treasures, we gotta use the Tireless team, the Provisioner, and the Tracker. Tracker's not too expensive these days. I don't remember when, but it's down to like $6, which seems good. I remember it being like 10 plus for a long time. I know the Tracker makes clues, not treasures, but clues are still permanents we can sack, or use it to draw more cards. Either way. I also like including Ulvenwald Mysteries. We are having non-token creatures die a lot, so we're going to be making an extra permanent. Sack a permanent, get a permanent. This just keeps the engine rolling. And notably, it doesn't care how you sacrifice that clue. If I sacrifice a clue to Baba Lysaga, I still get that human soldier creature token, which I'm probably going to sack and with the next clue token as well. Speaking of treasures, we're going to run Treasure Vault, which is also an artifact land if we need to sacrifice it the hard way. Grim Hireling is kind of like a very cheap version of Old Gnawbones. I mean, we got a ton of little dorks flying around, a little bit of evasion here or there. We can swarm pretty well, and we should be able to connect with quite a few. I realize only one needs to connect to get 2 treasures. We can't get multiples of 2 treasures this way, but 2 treasures is 2 treasures. Revel in Riches is up to about $12 in real life money, but it is a win con in this deck, and it does make us more treasures. Pitiless Plunderer, also about $12. That's a lot for an uncommon. And if we're going to drop 12 on Pitiless Plunderer, we should probably include Chatterfang for the infinite combo. Any creature dies, you make a treasure, which also makes a squirrel. We use the treasure to get the black mana to sacrifice that 1 squirrel to give a creature +X/-X. That triggers Pitiless Plunderer, which makes another treasure and another squirrel. Repeat until the whole board is dead except ours. $17 for these 2 cards. Seems pretty good. If you got it, throw it in. Deck's getting pretty full. A lot of good stuff in here, but I just want to throw a side idea in here, and we've got a little bit of clues going on. We've got some exploring. So maybe you want to do a Dora the Explorer theme? Jade Light Ranger has the Explore mechanic, and Path of Discovery gives every creature the Explore mechanic as they come in. See, this is a tough one because Path of Discovery is a good card. This is a good effect, but we've got some 4-mana green enchantments that are just commander staples that are drawing us cards every time creatures come in. I don't think this can compete, but if it's a Dora the Explorer theme deck, it doesn't have to. Dora's little monkey friend will be Scrounging Bandar to pass around +1/+1 counters, and Swiper No Swipey will be played by Thieving Amalgam. I actually don't think these cards are terrible in the deck though, if you just want to run them. Thieving Amalgam is expensive, but we get an extra permanent every turn to sack for Baba Lysaga, and now, if we include it, that 1 player loses 2 additional life in addition to the 3 that Baba Lysaga is already taking away from them. That's 5. 3 + 2 is 5. It's a significant chunk. So we haven't talked a ton of win cons yet, but there are plenty of cards that we could do for this. Maybe we run something like a Psychosis Crawler so that we're damaging our opponents every time we're drawing cards. We can draw a lot of cards. We're probably going to run those cards where our opponents take damage every time we sacrifice permanents or every time an artifact leaves play from our battlefield. And I think we've got enough little dorky creatures that we're willing to attack with that we might want to run Beastmaster Ascension. I think we'll get this thing up to 7 counters pretty quickly. So there you go. This deck seems like a lot of fun. A lot of stuff to do, and this engine runs hot. I haven't talked about it, but I'm probably going to want to look into ways to protect Baba Lysaga, and we'll probably want a few ways to untap our commander if we're super greedy. Something like 1,000-year elixir. What's that cost these days? Under $5? Not terrible. This was a fun one. I couldn't have done it without the help from those in the Discord. If you want to get involved, take a look at patreon.com/commandersbrew. In the meantime, see you next week for another deck tech, and keep being you. The world's a better place for it. See you next time.